Ugarit did not die in a myth. It died with paperwork still on the tables and danger already moving across the water. That is why Ugarit is such a strong case for a last normal day story. We are not guessing from legend alone. We have real letters, real archives, real houses, and a city burned hard enough to preserve its own final voice. Ugarit stood on the coast of what is now northern Syria at Ras Shamra. It was not as famous as Egypt or as huge as Assyria, but it was deeply tied to the great powers around it. Its rulers dealt with the Hittites, with Cyprus, with inland Syrian states, and with Egypt. That made Ugarit rich when the wider system worked. It also made Ugarit fragile when that same system began to break. This was a busy late Bronze Age kingdom, not an empty ruin waiting for disaster. The city had narrow streets, multi-story houses, workshops, and scribes doing real daily work. People made textiles there. People processed olive oil there. Merchants, diplomats, priests, and officials all depended on routine. That routine is what makes the ending so haunting. The last phase of Ugarit may have looked ordinary from street level even while the world holding it together was failing. One reason historians care so much about Ugarit is its writing system. It is famous for alphabetic cuneiform, one of the earliest practical alphabets we know in regular use. That matters because this civilization did not only leave walls and broken pots. It left records. Some archives were found in houses, not only in the palace. So literacy and record-keeping reached beyond the royal court. That means the city did not just run on kings and soldiers. It also ran on people counting goods, writing letters, and tracking obligations. Then the wider Bronze Age world began to crack. Around the years near 1200 BCE, palace economies, trade networks, food systems, and military protection all came under pressure. Scholars do not blame one single cause. They usually point to drought, famine, trade disruption, warfare, imperial weakness, and attacks by seaborne raiders later called Sea Peoples. The key point is not one movie villain. The key point is a chain of failures striking at the same time. Ugarit was the kind of place that could survive one shock. It was far less likely to survive 5 or 6 shocks at once. The famine evidence is one of the darkest parts of the story. Late letters mention hunger and urgent requests for grain. That changes the picture from a war story into a daily life story. People were not only afraid of enemy ships, they were also facing shortages that could hollow out a city from the inside. The tone of the record seems to change as the crisis deepens. Normal official language gives way to sharper, more desperate requests. That is exactly how a collapsing system often sounds. The paperwork keeps going, but the calm inside the paperwork is gone. The last known ruler of Ugarit was King Ammurapi. His letters give us some of the clearest warning signs. In one famous text, enemy ships have appeared and cities have been burned. In another, Ammurapi explains that his troops and chariots are away in Hittite territory. His own ships are in the land of Lucca. That means the kingdom is exposed at the very moment danger reaches the coast. Think about how terrifying that is. The king knows the enemy is near, but his fighting strength is somewhere else, tied to a larger empire that is also failing. Another late letter places enemy presence near Rasu, only a short distance from Ugarit. That detail matters because it brings the danger close enough to picture. This is not a rumor from the far side of the sea. This is fear moving toward the harbor, the storehouses, the homes, and the palace itself. What makes the story so chilling is that daily life may still have looked partly normal. Scribes were still writing. Records were still being kept. Officials were still trying to solve problems with letters, grain requests, and appeals for help. That is often what real collapse looks like. The routines keep moving even after the support under the routines has started to vanish. And then comes the cruelest irony in the whole story. The destruction that ended Ugarit helped preserve it. When the city burned, the fire baked many clay tablets hard enough to survive. The voice of the final phase lasted because the city died in flames. That detail alone feels almost impossible to invent, which is why it is so powerful. We should still be careful. No honest historian can rebuild one exact final Tuesday in Ugarit hour by hour. The evidence does not allow that level of certainty. What the evidence does allow is something almost as haunting. We can see the final ordinary window, probably over weeks or months, when markets, letters, and administration kept going under rising stress. That is the lesson hidden in Ugarit's end. Civilizations do not always announce collapse with one giant bang. Sometimes the last normal day feels normal because the people inside it have not yet learned how broken the system already is. Ugarit never returned to its old Bronze Age importance after the destruction. That gives the story its final weight. This was not a setback before recovery. For Ugarit, this was the end of a world. And if you want one image to remember, keep this one. A scribe presses signs into wet clay while ships gather offshore, grain runs short, and the old order quietly runs out of time.